and discuss some of the issues that I've been seeing pop up online, specifically the few clips that I've been able to see from the Cornel West and Jimmy Dore interview. Um, I haven't been a huge fan of a lot of the commentary online from either side of things, so um, I'm very interested in talking about where I think the Marxist-Leninist outlook position on some of the questions that they bring up would be, and where one is right and where the other one's right, and where at times both might be right and both might be at the same time a little wrong, because they're approaching things in a somewhat one-sided and non-dialectical, very binary manner. But yeah, I'm excited to talk about this and the Jackson Hinkle. I think I've seen maybe one of the clips of him on Tim Pool. I have some comments I'm excited to give on that as well. But yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. The places they were able to find common ground and stuff. But I haven't seen the Jimmy Dore Cornel West interview yet. I've just seen clips all over Twitter. But yeah, you want to pull that up and jump right into it?
Yeah, and by the way, someone's asking in the comments whether we've seen the commentary that RBN has given on it. We have not, by the way. So,
No, just what they tweeted about it.
yeah.
I think about you. I think of George Carlin. The Union Seminary is right across the street from George Carlin Place.
Oh, really? No kidding.
What a grand genius. He grew up on 121st and Broadway next to Corpus Christi Church, and they got a beautiful sign saluting him. And beside Richard Pryor, he's got to be one of the greatest comic geniuses of the last 50 years, my brother.
Well, I certainly wish he was still alive right now, because I know he would see through all the propaganda that we've been living through, at least since 2015. But I want to just, before we start, I want to get this out there, because some people misunderstood my coverage of your appearance with Anderson Cooper, and they took it as an attack on you, when I was merely trying to help you get the message right about the Ukraine war. Because as a radical, part of your job is to educate people on what's actually happening, and you have to be crystal clear in explaining it to people, especially about what's happening in Ukraine. So people took that as me trying to attack you, when I was doing it more as a coach, trying to help you and get it right. And that's what I'm going to be doing in this interview also, because I was thrilled to hear that you're running third party. You got more courage than I do to do it. You're a better man than me. And so I appreciate you doing it, because you're getting the message out there about the Ukraine party duopoly.
An interesting way to approach it, to just to be like, I'm the coach and I'm here to teach you. It's a little bit, it comes off as condescending. It really does. As did his critique of Cornel West on Anderson Cooper.
I didn't see the critique that he gave of Cornel West on Anderson Cooper, but that's the first thing that stuck out to me. And there are some overtones there, besides the condescension that's that I could see, like folks being mad at, and seeing perhaps some racial overtones there. I'm not saying that there are, but it comes off extremely condescending, and like for Jimmy Dore, one of the things that I've kind of appreciated, or used to appreciate, about Jimmy Dore was how humble he was. He was always the guy that said, I'm a pothead, dumb comedian, but I'm getting this right. Everyone else should be. So that kind of symbolizes, at least for me, a change in tone. He's usually someone that's very humble in how he approaches issues and commentary, and he's always kind of like bringing himself down in the process of that. And for him to just like talk to Cornel West kind of like he's a school kid, and he's like this older, wiser coach, it comes off as wrong. And I'm sure that our view on the issue in Ukraine is closer to Jimmy's. And I one of the main criticisms that we've had of Cornel West and his discourse has been how he has been speaking about Russia and China, and I haven't seen some of that discourse in the last interviews. But then again, I don't think he's been doing too much as of recent. He did a whole lot of interviews when he announced, and then it feels like he's, in terms of interviews, kind of fell off in the last few weeks. But it comes off condescending as hell, in my view.
Yeah, this person says Midwest Mark seems very Dem light with that first critique. I mean, first of all, the Democrats are attacking Cornel West with everything they have right now, so I don't know how defending Cornel West is Dem light. But it's just like interpersonal relationships. Like if I was talking to another wrestler who hadn't been involved with the sport of wrestling as long as I had, if I had been involved for many years longer than they have, you know, and these two have both been involved in the struggle forever, but Cornel West definitely longer than Jimmy Dore. And that beginner wrestler started telling me, I'm here to coach you. I'm here to tell you what to do. I mean, there are guys like that. It's annoying as crap. So it's more of, you know, just an annoying thing. Yeah, we're not saying that Jimmy Dore is a condescending racist or anything. That just came off as a condescending thing to say. I would say that to anyone. It is what it is.
Agreed.
This is really important. And so if I just want to tell people, so if it seems like I'm being critical of Cornel West from here going forward to the election, what it is going to be is me trying to help make his message even better than it is, because I think it's really important that his message get out there. That's what this is about. So anyway, I just wanted to clear that up.
Oh, sure. I think the important thing always is, brother, that, you know, we the anthem of Black folk is lifted.
And someone said here, Jimmy said he respected West, that his critique is fierce because he cares. And I think that's probably true. Like, we're not doubting that. We're just saying, like, even just from a tactical standpoint, if you know he's got a disagreement with you, you should approach the helping of him cross that bridge and that disagreement in a different fashion, not just approaching it as like, I'm the coach and I'm gonna, I'm the guy that can help you. But yeah.
Lift every voice, not lift every echo. You got a voice. I've got a voice. Our voices overlap. Our voices can have tension. Our voices can conflict. We can learn from one another. We proceed. We've got a similar critique of predatory capitalist society. We've got similar critique of a whole host of issues, and certain things we disagree with. Well, that's understandable too. I'm learning from you. You learning from me. But it's the respect more than anything else that's crucial here. And I think I appreciate you starting off with that kind of a reflection, my brother. Very much so.
So now people make a big deal out of the fact that you endorsed Joe Biden in 2020, and now you're running against him. And the reason what was the reason you endorsed him in 2020, and what has changed since?
Yeah, one, I was thoroughly convinced that we needed an anti-fascist coalition, and that included the kind of milquetoast warmongering neoliberals like Biden. And now it's fairly clear Biden had 4 years. He had 4 years to steal the thunder from any kind of Trump challenge, 4 years to try to speak to the needs of poor and working people, 4 years to try to cut back on the military adventurism. That's been characteristic of his whole career. And it's clear to me now that if the only opposition to the escalating neo-fascism in the country is going to be Biden, or Biden-like, then the fascism is coming anyway. We're going to have alternative vision, alternative institutions, alternative infrastructures that has an alternative passion. And so if all we can do is produce democratic administrations that are caretakers, postponers of the Trump or Trump-like candidates, then the fascism is coming anyway. The only way you really get at the roots of fascism is to break from the corporate duopoly, to show how the two-party system is an impediment for the unleashing not only of American democracy, but also trying to dismantle the empire in terms of the 800 military units around the world and the military budget taking 57 cents for every dollar. And so in that sense, there's been a shift. There's no doubt about that. And I keep in mind, I supported Ralph Nader and Jill Stein. And in between, I had early supported Bill Bradley, and I had supported John Kerry as a kind of anti-right-wing coalition too. So that my jazz-like activity certainly can be characterized at times with a certain kind of inconsistency, but it's the timing of it. Each moment has its own context.
So now our friend Nick Cruz says that many climate activists have no idea how much they destroyed all their credibility by endorsing and supporting Joe Biden, the Nord Stream pipeline bomber, and the largest eco-terrorist in modern human history, for president. Why should anyone take climate or environmental issues seriously when you obviously do not? Now, what do you say back to that kind of critique that by endorsing him, you lose your credibility?
Well, it becomes, I think, I've been on my dear brother's show a number of times, and I think there's always a certain force in the argument of trying to be consistently third party across the board, having no relation whatsoever to the bourgeois politicians. I think there's force to that. But I think the credibility that one has really is holistic. It's wholesale rather than just retail. And the credibility that you have in regard to being consistently against war, consistently against capital, consistently against white supremacy, even if it has different kind of stances from one election to the next. That would be one of the ways in which I would try to respond to that. That would be the beginning of a response to that.
Okay. Here's another tweet from Nick. He says the same professional managerial class gaslighters want us to take it easy on Bernie. They use civility politics as a weapon so they can comfortably sell out. The working class must reject this and start holding these people accountable for selling us out. So Bernie has sold us out, and I don't need you to call him a sellout or anything. That's fine. But I do want to see, this is your response, because Bernie was asked about your campaign, and he said it shouldn't happen, and he's against it, and he's endorsing Biden, and of course that is just garbage. And so this is how you responded.
And even in love, people have deep disagreements about these things. But I think again, he's fearful of the neo-fascism of Trump.
So when my what I would say to you here, and this is a big point, and I'm trying to impress upon you going forward, that when you do that, you sound a little bit like Joe Biden, and what you're doing is you're giving a pass to Bernie Sanders and anybody else for voting lesser.
And I do kind of agree with the substance of his critique. I had a criticism of the form, that he brought up his critique in calling, himself the coach and Cornel the student. I just don't think that's accurate. But I agree. I think Cornel West should be stronger, and I do think it's a little bit silly to call Trump a neo-fascist and assume that then Biden isn't, a neo-fascist, when Biden's the one who has been in favor of this project in Ukraine to fund and arm fascists from the beginning. And I mean, Trump also, didn't do anything to stop that when he was president. He allowed the U.S. and their NGOs and the NED to continue meddling in Ukraine. But right now, Biden is breaking the rail strikes and, allowing the workers' conditions to get worse and worse at home while sending money directly to fascists. So I do agree with Jimmy, and I also get it's hard, though. Like if I had a personal relationship with Bernie Sanders, it might be harder to call him out, but you got to do what you got to do for the good of the campaign.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think Jimmy's trying to get him to call him out in that form. I wonder, and this is something that I feel, having just watched the interview before doing this, that a large chunk of their conversations perhaps would have been best done in private. Jimmy does make a comment afterwards saying that they haven't let him speak to Cornel in private. His team has kept Jimmy away as much as possible. So a lot of these things, he had to bring them up in that setting. There's a lot of stuff that could be going on that, we don't have the facts in order to pass as concrete, comprehensive a judgment as possible. But when it comes to this, I'm sorry, but I think Jimmy is correct in this area in terms of substance. If one party is a neo-fascist party, or one candidate is a neo-fascist candidate and the other one isn't, if you're an anti-fascist, you're kind of forced to go with the non-fascist candidacy. That's why the logic of the lesser of two evils-ism, if it's premised by the assumption that one part is fascist and the other one isn't, it's a valid logic. It follows. But what you have to check is, are those premises justified? Are those premises true? Is it true that one, Trump is fascist and bringing forth a fascist threat? And two, if he is or isn't, can a similar thing be said about the Democrats, the Democrats, right? What standard are we judging fascism through? If you ask a whole host of intellectuals on the left what they think of when they think of fascism, a lot of them are perhaps going to go to the authoritarian personality and, the Adorno, Horkheimer, Frankfurt School, fake left bullshit that sees, anything that's slightly related to discipline or any of that stuff as authoritarian. If you go to another more liberal segment, you'll see something tied to individuals. If you go to a more culturalist segment, they'll emphasize the aspect of fascism that's tied to blaming minorities, which is always an aspect that's present in fascism. But we have to ask, what's the deeper thing? And what the Marxist tradition has always postulated in the works of primarily Dimitrov, which has been the central theorist from the Third International tradition, has been that fascism is a force that's ever present in capitalism. It is seen explicitly in those moments where the capitalist state has to exist in a form that's dominated by coercion and by slashing and destroying through the most terroristic dictatorship of finance capital, the gains that people have made, the democratic gains of the working class. And it in part does this ideologically, the justification in order to spin it. It usually has to present itself as an attack of the status quo. That's something that every fascist development at the level of ideology presented themselves as counter-hegemonic, but in reality, we're fully, proliferate. We're the condition that's allowed the proliferation of the same status quo. They realize in many ways, like Lampedusa's The Leopard, that in order for things to stay the same, they must change. That only in changing can things stay the same and the same order continue. Um, so when you come from the Marxist tradition, it's difficult just pointing at different people and seeing, oh, this guy's a fascist, this guy's not. And this whole game of who's more fascist than another, where it becomes like a fascism Olympics, it doesn't make much sense. We're talking about a reality that's ever present in capitalism, specifically in its moments of crisis, which are the same moments that produce the potential for working class revolutions, right? We realize that right now we have an objectively revolutionary potential, a crisis of legitimacy. People's lives are getting worse. We've talked about this a million times. The same ground, the same moment that creates that potential for us as communists creates the potential for the deepest forms of reactions, which we see coming from both parties. The only difference is that one does it in a way that tries to sustain a progressive and woke veneer that's it claims to be good on issues of minorities and stuff, and the other one does it in a way that doesn't do that. But we shouldn't be fooled by that. Those are not substantial differences. Those are differences in appearance that are necessary in order to sustain the substance of a world that's dominated by capital in a time of crisis where capital is trying to find a way to fight back and continue living on and sucking in the most parasitic form, which it does in our age.
And I think Cornel probably, this is my main critique of him so far, he's got too many leftists around him, or he's listening to too many leftists rather than making, as you said, a Marxist analysis. So I saw Jenny said, as soon as he ditched the People's Party and hopped on with the Greens after like 3 days, you kind of knew he was, going to cave to some of these leftists. And there were also strategic reasons for joining the Green Party, and I'm not mad at him for it. But yeah, I mean, it seemed like he just got a bunch of backlash. He was like, oh, okay, I'll change my opinion. And then Jimmy Dore saying that this is his first time speaking with Cornel, like, whatever criticisms you have of Jimmy Dore, he's got over 1 million subscribers. He's got a giant audience. Why would you not take advantage of that? The only reason I can think of is if he had some leftists around him who were like, no, Jimmy Dore is a fascist, apologist, misogynist, blah, blah, blah. So I think he just needs to learn to tune that out. It's like the graph I made the other day, Carlos. This is a graph. The leftists mad at Midwestern Marx, the growth of Midwestern Marx. The more you grow, the more you're going to have leftists yelling at you and being mad at you for stuff. So you got to learn to tune them out, because if you just stay in that echo chamber and say things that and refrain from saying and doing things that are popular with the masses because you're afraid that the cancel culture left is going to get mad at you, then you're going to be less popular with the masses. They're gatekeepers really for the left is how they act.
Yeah. And we think here that Cornell's wrong. Dore's a lot closer to what I think the correct Marxist position should be. But I still think, of course, that Cornell is someone with tremendous integrity, that perhaps he's been influenced, like we all are constantly influenced by our environment. But I don't think that his views are something that he's taking because of opportunistic reasons. Like, he's not just taking them in order for the leftists to like them. He's taking them because he thinks they're right, and we might believe they're wrong. But if there's something that I don't think we could ever say about Dr. West, is that he's not a man of integrity. If he says something, he means it, and if he means something, he says it. I don't know whatever the saying goes, but and that's there's another part here where we're about to watch where Jimmy Dore kind of hints at who's giving you those ideas, or who's giving you who's coaching you, or basically, and it's like, don't do that. You're making it seem like, this legendary black intellectual, perhaps the most famous American philosopher of the century, that he can't think for himself. I'm sorry, but that has some racist undertones, and it's just a reality. And again, perhaps in terms of the substance that he's critiquing, Jimmy might be right, but there are way better ways for Jimmy to achieve what he's trying to achieve, which is to change Cornel's mind through a different approach. Yeah.
Of two evils. So you're endorsing the Democrats' message in their campaign. And so now people can dismiss your candidacy and say, well, we got to worry about the neo-fascism of Trump, as if Joe Biden isn't worse, which he is. He's a bigger fascist. And he just crushed a union strike on the railroad, which is the definition of fascism. He's now trying to saber rattle with two nuclear powers, nuclear war, nothing more important than that. And what he's doing in Ukraine, you know exactly what he's doing, right? So he's the worst warmonger in the world. 300,000 Ukrainians have already been slaughtered in this proxy war that was provoked by NATO, which you know. So when do you think that when you say that about, when you call Donald Trump a neo-fascist and you don't say that about Joe Biden, what do you say when I tell you that you're undercutting your own campaign and you are propping up the Democratic message, which is that they are the lesser of two evil and you have to vote for Joe Biden so we don't have fascism? By the way, we already have fascism. As we all know, fascism is the joining of corporate and government to screw the worker.
Carlos.
And that's exactly.
You were muted.
Oh, I was just saying that it's true. It is true. If one side is fascist and the other is not, if you're anti-fascist, you should vote for the side that it's not. So he is, by sustaining that narrative, he's shooting himself in the foot. And in another way that I don't think Jimmy mentions, perhaps he does, I don't recall, but if you're actually trying to organize the part of Trump's base that was working class, which he's repeatedly said, I'm going to go down to Trump country and organize these. If you go there with a message like, you guys are following a fascist, it's not going to be very popular. Like both you and I have done a whole lot of organizing in the Midwest. The way we've brought Trump workers into our positions has not been by telling them the guy you're following, the guy who your ideas are aligned with, is a fascist. Because what's implied in that is that they, in terms of their ideas, are aligned with fascism ideologically. And no one wants that. So it's a non-starter when it comes to conversations with this base of people that Cornel West says he wants to interact with. And I think he does genuinely. So at the level of organizing, I don't think that's a very smart strategy either.
Pan American says any host of the Dore show, or any guest, I think he meant, on the Dore show should expect zero softball questions. Dore is all hardball. Agreed, but part of my issue too is he had RFK on, and RFK was saying some straight up Zionist nonsense, and Jimmy barely pressed him on it. Which was disappointing, and I think Jimmy even apologized to his audience for that. So again, we like Jimmy Dore. We think he's right about a lot of stuff. We think, even I know he's crass. He's a comedian, and that's what people love about him. He's sort of like a leftist version of Trump. We like him, but nobody's beyond critique. Same goes for Cornel.
And this is a good point here from Battle Kozak. It's one that Glenn Ford from the Black Agenda Report used to make, which is that the Democrats are not the lesser evil. They're the most effective one, because it's the one that covers itself and its wolf body in a sheep clothing and convinces people, and it's able to get close to them and stab them from up close. You could see as Malcolm X used to say, you could see the wolf coming. But when he's disguised as a sheep, it makes it harder. So it's the more insidious evil, I would say.
What Joe Biden, the Democrats, and Pete Buttigieg did, and so they will keep doing it, and they're not stopping it. And they're also for censorship, which is the hallmark of fascism. So this idea that Donald Trump is more of a fascist than Joe Biden undermines your own campaign. There's no doubt about that. And so what I would encourage you to stop doing that. What do you say back?
Hey, no, we deeply disagree on that. don't think, and this is why I disagree with Nick too, that, and I appreciate your advice here, cast in a respectful way, but we do, and I disagree with Brother Nick on this too, that I just got back from Mississippi. You know that. You know what the Jenkins and Parkins, the two brothers brutalized by the police. There at the church, the Klan still running wild, not just with votes, but terrorizing black folk. The Goon Squad finally got caught by the two lawyers, Brother Malik and Brother Trent. Now, what does that mean? That means that when you talk about fascism, you're talking not just about the rule of big money, not just the rule of big military, not just the rule of corporate power, so that it's oligarchic in essence, but you're also talking about dictatorial rule, no elections, the elimination of dissident voices, and then the scapegoating of the most vulnerable, which could be immigrants, it could be workers, it could be black people, Jews, Arabs, and so forth. See, with under Biden, what you have is a fascist dimension domestically, especially against black folk and others. You and I, the very fact that we're having this dialogue without being eliminated overnight, a fascist regime could completely call into question with the use of arbitrary power. That's what happens in the mass incarceration regime.
But they kind of are doing that for some people. They just that because they haven't done it to Dore yet, we can't turn a blind eye to what they just did to Max Blumenthal and the folks at the Gray Zone. We can't turn a blind eye to what they've done to Mint Press News through PayPal, TikTok. We can't turn a blind eye to what they've done to our institute, and specifically our TikTok part of the institute, which is the one that reaches the vast majority of people. That at one point was reaching millions of people on like a individual TikTok video basis. So they kind of are acting like that. They're being as smart as they can be about it, but it's very clear that the censorship is being ramped up. I mean, as soon as the special military operation started, RT was banned from everywhere. And that meant that shows like Abby Martin's show, which I think was hosted by RT, shows like Chris Hedges' show, which is, I think, one of his advisors, a bunch of, really, really good shows that, were from American spokespeople, the people that were getting their sustenance from the capacity to do this work through this institution. All of those were banned from one day to another for a conflict that, at least formally, we claim to not be involved. We know that's complete bullshit. But so even that example is not very good, because there's a ton of other counter examples where they have been acting like that.
I mean, the TikTok thing was quite ridiculous. Like 7 accounts taken down, and it happened immediately as the U.S. government forced ByteDance to hand over management of TikTok to a U.S. company, where then a bunch of national security agents and NATO operatives began managing TikTok's content and systematically deleted 300,000 accounts who were, socialists or criticizing NATO's role in the war in Ukraine. And now on TikTok, the biggest accounts are either liberal imperialists like Philip DeFranco, and you also have these accounts with like double lightning bolts in their bios getting thousands of views, and they don't get taken down. These explicitly fascist accounts. Because when you take away people like us and the audience of people like us who are combating fascism with the antithesis of capitalism and fascism, which is socialism and communism, you allow fascism to grow and fester instead. So, there is a mass censorship regime going on under Biden, and it's only going to continue. They're looking to make it more and more stringent as time goes on. So,
vis-a-vis poor black people and others. Right. So that is the fascist dimension. Similarly, so in terms of militarism abroad. So that there's fascist elements, my brother, there's fascist dimensions. But with Trump, when you have calling into question transfer of power and so forth, that is not the same thing. And so that doesn't undermine my campaign at all. The campaign's about truth.
100% undermines your campaign. 100%. You're shooting yourself right in the...
Sorry.
No, you're good. That's fine. But he says Trump was calling into question the transfer of power, meaning he was calling into question the election, right? Like Hillary has done for the last 8 years, about 2016, not only falsely claiming that the elections were rigged by Russia, but literally falsifying news stories, which she would then hand to the mainstream media so they could blast over a loudspeaker, Trump is funded by Russia. Trump is funded by Russia. All lies, but apparently, and I'm not saying Cornel West is saying this, but a lot of Democrats are saying Trump is a fascist for calling into question the 2020 election, but just completely ignore that Hillary's been questioning the 2016 election for the last 8 years because she's a narcissist who can't accept that she lost, and it gives her a nice, convenient way to do anti-Russia propaganda.
And it wasn't just random media hysteria. They tried to indict him and impeach him a few times. So those are direct actions taken against a sitting president that was elected democratically. You can question why did people vote, but you can do whatever you want. But elected democratically, who you tried to remove from office through lawfare on the basis of the fact that you just didn't want him there for, he's not a good face to put on the front cover of Empire. And you used the institutional means you could to try to get him out. It didn't work then, and you're continuing to do that now. So if anyone is going to be charged with the very consistent attempt at trying to overthrow the results of an election and using lawfare in the process and institutional supports from the institutions of the status quo, it should be the Democrats. That doesn't mean that you don't find aspects of it on the other side, but in terms of this issue, the Democrats have been much more militant in trying to depose Trump than Trump has been in trying to overthrow the last election. But it tells you something in general about the crisis that we're seeing in the ruling class, and that's something that we can never lose sight of. Remember what Lenin tells us are some of the conditions which allow us to know when we're in an objectively revolutionary situation. It's not just that the lives of people get incredibly difficult and they feel like they can't continue to live in the old way. It's the ruling class itself that can't continue to live in the old way. There begins to occur very sharp splits in the ruling class. And what are we seeing in this, if not the sharp splits in the ruling class manifesting themselves in various forms? And then you also see the forms that it takes internationally with the fall of Western imperialism in general, the rise of multipolarity, and all these other events that we've been covering quite closely on the channel. But
Dick, before you even start. So that's just bad. You're getting bad advice. I don't know who's advising you, but they're giving you horrible advice.
January. I'm a free man. I'm a free man, brother.
So January.
But I want to hear your argument. I want to hear your argument as to how Biden is more fascist than Trump.
Trump
just lay it out right quick.
Well, I'll tell you right now. The reason why the deep state Russiagated Trump was because he wouldn't bomb enough to calm them down. So he wouldn't do enough bombing. The reason they impeached him because he wouldn't ship arms to Nazis in Ukraine. And he was against.
He kind of did. And he also created the conditions for much more to be shipped out. But he was inconsistently imperialist. So he wasn't consistent enough with his imperialism. He somewhat normalized relations with the DPRK. The relations with Russia were a lot better than what they are now. But then you turn around and you look at him murdering Qasem Soleimani and basically putting us at the edge of World War III with Iran. You look at what he did in intensifying the sanctions regime against Venezuela, and now boasting that when he was still in power, they almost had Venezuela. They would have had all that oil, and now that Venezuela is stabilizing itself again. He brought back, after this short period of the Obama-Cuban thaw, he brought all the sanctions back and put Cuba back on the list of a state sponsor of terror. So there's a whole lot of things where he was extremely imperialist in some ways, a little bit more than going further than what Obama was doing. And there's other areas where he wasn't going enough in areas that are very strategic to the interest, to the most principal interest of empire right now, specifically the issue of Ukraine.
So that's
so just are you defending Trump as somehow being a person who is?
Oh, by the way, yeah, Biden did continue all the policies, both against Venezuela against Iran, against Cuba, against virtually everyone, and that's been conjoined with a ramping up of those policies and against other parts of the world, and putting us on the precipice of a nuclear Armageddon, both in Russia and now as the tide turns to the war with China. Eventually, we'll be in the same, perhaps more dangerous position with China.
So, I don't understand. I don't understand your argument at this point, though, man. What are we talking about?
Okay, so there's.
I want to understand what the content of your argument is, because one can, in fact, bring critique to bear on the system as a whole with the two corporate wings. But somehow, what do you say to trans and gays and lesbian brothers and sisters in terms of their rights?
So that's again. Joe Biden is responsible for the mass incarceration, not Donald Trump. Who is more responsible for black and brown people being locked up and America being the largest penal colony in the world? Is it Donald Trump or would it be Joe Biden? By the way, this conversation is a loser for your campaign. Sitting here trying to make the argument.
It could be a loser for you too, though.
Trying to make the argument.
You trying to make the case that somehow the Democrats are more fascist than the Republicans. The fascism cuts across the board.
But that's not how you say it, though. You say it's only Donald Trump.
I think that's what they're both trying to say, because that's what Jimmy Dore came out saying. Like, this is, if you're going to talk about fascism, you should talk about how it cuts across the board, and it's a general phenomenon of capitalism in moments like the ones that we're existing in. That's not how Dr. West is phrasing it when he's doing interviews. He calls Trump a neo-fascist. He calls Biden a milquetoast liberal. I don't know what's so milquetoast about a guy sending $150 billion to Nazis. A guy that's having, Nazis running around in Orlando, Florida, saying that they prefer Biden because he sends money to Ukraine. And amongst those Nazi goons, of course, he had that lizard-looking guy that was all tatted that has gone and fought in Ukraine with the Nazis. So,
Yeah, and I agree that it's, and if he wants to make the argument that fascism cuts across the board, I'm going to call them both fascists or neither because they're equally fascistic. Like, I think that's the way to go. But I do agree with Jimmy that it's not a winning message for Cornel's campaign to sit here and make the argument that the Democrats are less fascistic than Trump. I just don't think the majority of Americans are going to agree with that, nor do I think it's necessarily true. So yeah, I think they should just agree that fascism cuts across the board, and it can be seen in both parties now. What's up, David? Thank you so much for the $5 super chat. Appreciate you, brother. Good evening.
Getting the ball rolling with the super chats, baby. Woo! Just like he was our first Patreon, so very symbolic. Thank you so much, David.
He's always getting stuff started for us.
All righty.
You don't say it cuts across the board. You call Joe Biden milquetoast, and you call Donald Trump a fascist. So you're not saying Joe Biden is a fascist, really?
I said there's fascist dimensions to the Biden project. You're absolutely right.
It's like you're campaigning for Joe Biden almost when you're doing this. That's what it sounds like.
Ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
But that's what I'm not saying you are doing that. I'm saying that's what it sounds like.
What it sounds like.
That is ridiculous. That's not true. It never. I mean, like, he's running a third-party candidacy and getting attacked by the entirety of the Democratic Party, for doing so, in the entire liberal media. He doesn't sound like he's campaigning for Joe Biden. I mean, yeah, I don't agree with that. I know he's heated right now, but thanks.
Right, and listen, thank you so much, Sebastian. And this is the part where I was like, I think these discussions are good, but if Jimmy's interest is in helping Cornel West as like the only major third-party campaign out there that has some potential of breaking through the duopoly, has been polling at 4%. So it has the potential of breaking through that 5% mark and getting federal funding. And then who knows, if it gets to 15, it can go on stage. So if he's got so much potential, if there's so much ideological proximity, why take the one event that you have to give him a platform to have the people that follow you, which are from in terms of ideology, from a broad background, why take that one event to make him look as bad as possible, hammering out the issues that Cornel's not, I think, at least in my view, the best on. Why not I don't know. We always do this thing when we interview someone, or sometimes we do, where we have the conversation that's on air, and then we have a short conversation afterwards. I feel like maybe that could have been a better approach. If there's no opportunities for that, send them. I don't see what's won here. What is won when two people who agree on the vast majority of things, who would like to see our class struggle move in the same direction, and who are in the same fight, what's won when they just battle against each other on the most popular leftist show that exists on the internet? I don't see what's won. It just feels like what's gonna come out of this is more and more and more splits in an already very fractured left. And I'm sorry, whenever I see these artificial and unnecessary splits going on, there's always a blinker that goes into my head. Either what's going on is some Fed shit, or is people who are acting in a way that benefits the State Department without realizing that that's what they're doing. Because I don't see the role of these. How many people from Jimmy's audience now who would have maybe voted Cornel if he would have highlighted the positive parts are not going to do that? And I agree, we have to critique his negative parts, but this sort of interaction, I just think it would have been better done in private. Or if you're going to have that conversation, have it in a more cordial manner that doesn't antagonize the one person who I think has the best shot at advancing the class struggle forward in our historical moment. I might be wrong, though. I mean, I don't know. So,
yeah, I just realized the name of the video is Cornel West as a 45-minute commercial for Joe Biden. Like, dude, that's just not accurate. He's running third party and getting lambasted by the establishment for it. And, what are you doing other than, what is Jimmy doing with this video? He's jumping on the same narrative about Cornel, or he's jumping on the anti-Cornel West train that the establishment media is doing. So, you could make the same accusation against Jimmy. You could be like, and being so harsh on Cornel West and dismissing him completely, you're doing the work of the Democratic Party. You're attacking this third party anti-establishment challenge to Joe Biden by saying he's the same as Joe Biden when, in terms of policy and in terms of rhetoric, he's simply not. Thank you so much, Joseph Serrano, for the $5 super chat. Appreciate all y'all.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right about that. It's sad to see, and then they get into another contentious topic after this, which is, again, I don't know. Jimmy's also a human being. Jimmy's also a human being. I think that we expect people that are that big online, that are media personalities of sorts, to be able to at times put all of the emotions aside and just be cold. But it's clear that Jimmy's someone who has perhaps a lot of love for Cornel West, who's interested in this fight, and who has, in many cases, very valid criticisms of some of the approaches that Cornel is taking. Maybe, who knows, it's been a few months already since Cornel announced. He says that he hasn't been able to get a private hearing with Cornel because the team doesn't let him. So who knows what series of factors are in the background that are affecting a human being's emotions and leading to these sorts of interactions. And then we're sitting here in the cool of the moment without any of that background, criticizing the formalities. So it's always important to keep that human component in mind. And even if we would say, I wish it would have been in this other fashion, maybe not condemn people for being human and getting excited and getting into it, as it's natural to be done. And we can only hope people not do that. But yeah, keep going.